So, good morning and welcome to this presentation. This is Father Marcus from the Costa Blanca Anglican Chaplaincy, and I have to say I'm delighted to be in the church that gathers in Albia, and we are celebrating the Eucharist together. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Thank you, online viewers, for taking the trouble to tune in. I'm humbled by your presence. We've just heard the gospel story, Jesus telling another parable, and the interesting thing is that he decides to change the world by telling stories. And this is a story of a man who sows wheat in his field, and then the people who are supposed to look after it and collect it discover that someone has been along and sowed weeds in amongst the wheat, and says, should I come and pluck them out? Where do they come from? And Jesus says an enemy has come and planted that darnel, and no, don't pluck it out yet, because you might pluck out the wheat at the same time. So wait until it's fully grown, and then we can pluck it out and separate them off. It's an incredible parable, and it teaches us a great deal. Jesus is trying to deal with the big issue that we have. And this is the issue of evil in our world. It is a stumbling block for so many, because if God is such a good God and loves us, why is there evil and why is there suffering? It's been a stumbling block for people throughout Christian history. And this is one of the attempts that Jesus has of helping us put it into some sort of context. The darnel that has been sown is also called tares, is a degraded sort of wheat. The theory is that it was wheat in some pre-evolved state, but it degraded, it tarnished, but it looks exactly like the wheat. But if you mix it up, not only does it become poisonous, but it tastes absolutely bitter and upsets the stomach of anyone who would take it on board. One of the things that teaches us is that it's very difficult to discern it right from the very beginning. One of the problems with evil is that it can look the same as goodness. It can come from a similar root, and it can be brought about, interestingly, from the best of intentions. And Jesus is aware of this, and he says to those who are looking after the fields, don't pluck it yet, because we've got to discern the reality of it. So let it grow together. And then when it's all flourished and blossomed and grown, you can definitely tell the difference. This is such wise teaching and makes such complete sense. In a sense, what Jesus is saying is we're not in the position to discern what's going on when we encounter something that we don't like right at the very beginning. You know this, and I know this. When we started this lockdown 4 months ago, the bishop phoned me up, bless him, Bishop David. I did tell him that I thought he was the best bishop in the world. Bishop David, I hope you're listening. If you're not listening, someone who is listening, tell him I said that. He is so gentle and so kind and so caring. I don't know whether he phoned all of the clergy in his diocese, it would have taken him ages, but he did phone us. And he asked us how we were getting on, and he asked us how we were coping, and asked us about what was going on. And it wasn't a short phone call. It wasn't just a cursory checking us out. It was a long, involved, caring, loving phone call. And we spoke for a good amount of time. 2 weeks later, he phoned again. And it was the same. It was the same caring attitude. And I was so lifted by his impact and what he was doing. But in that second one, he said, we're understanding now that this is going on for longer than we had ever thought it might. And there will be all sorts of pastoral issues and concerns that will develop and will emerge through this that we're not expecting. Not least the issue of people who, for example, have a bereavement and can't have the funeral that they want, or have an illness and can't be comforted by their family and their friends, or people at the end of life not being able to receive the last rites. And he drew all of that out. But he also said, within your congregations, there will be people who will, because of the nature of what they're going through, struggle. And when people struggle, sometimes they get tetchy with one another. Sometimes they just get short with one another. And sometimes they start to look for the worst rather than the best. That's what the bishop told me when he phoned me. It was not surprising that when we had an archdeaconry Zoom meeting, the archdeacon brought up the same thing. He'd obviously been contacted by the bishop. And he said, I don't want to tell you this, but I've been on the receiving end of more than the usual number of people being a bit critical of others, a bit short with others, a bit less accepting of what has been going on. What I've discovered, looking at some of the things that have happened across our chaplaincy, that these predictions are playing out in real life. The virus has done a great deal to bring out the best in people. You know that. And we've all seen it. We've all seen those people who have been so sacrificial in their love and their care for others. And it was such a joy to witness the praise that was given out to the National Health Service and the health service here in Spain. We all know that. And we all know how hard people have worked in order to make sure that other people are safe and other people are well and other people are looked after. We know all of that. But it's also brought out the worst in people. People have been short. People have looked at what's been happening and been critical. People have been judgmental, and it has been divisive. And now the new Archbishop of York has spoken about this and said the church is expressing a certain amount of tribalism in the way that people are coping with this. People are getting rooted into a faction, and there are witnessing divisions. No one expected this at the beginning, that the consequence of this virus would be, not only in churches, but in so many organisations, an unexpected sense of division. And yet it's a reality. And people of faith have spotted it coming. And so how brilliant it is that when we're able at last to gather back into churches and get on with our worship, we have this incredible story, this parable by Jesus, who says, first of all, sometimes you can't tell where this evil comes from because it looks very similar to the good stuff. Sometimes you can't make a judgment too soon because you might think that's a bad thing, and in fact it turns out to be a good thing. Or you might think that's a good thing and it turns out to be a bad thing. So what Jesus says is, in real terms, just take a step back and don't make any rash decisions just yet. Take a step back from the fray, take a step back from the anxiety, take a step back from the judgments, take a step back from responding too quickly to some of those things that you think you've witnessed or think you've seen or think you've read in an email or a WhatsApp or a video from me or a letter from me or from whoever it might be. Take a step back and try and discern whether it is good or bad, or whether the intention is good or bad. Because my friends, I genuinely believe that our intentions are all for the best, even if we're doing things in different ways. And our dream and our desire is to keep people safe and to build the kingdom of God and to do things that are practical and safe to do when it's okay and practical and safe to do them. This is not the time for reading things into events that aren't meant to be there. Jesus goes on with this parable and this story and unpacks the meaning of it. When he's asked by his disciples, what's it about? He tells them very clearly. And the impact of what he's saying is sometimes there is evil and it comes from an outside source and we can't have any issue with it, but it does need to be rooted out. Other than that, he says, let's take time to discern genuinely what is going on. I say this because I absolutely love our chaplaincy. I love all of our churches. Each one is unique, each one is different, each one is a beautiful representation of the love of God. But I have witnessed over the last few weeks divisions arising and tensions arising and people reading things into stuff that they've read or stuff that they've heard or stuff that they've seen that genuinely aren't meant to be there. And this is not about blame. This is not about passing any remarks. This is about understanding that this is a consequence not of our own making, but a consequence of the way that this change in normality has had an effect on so many people. I'm delighted to be here in this church, but I will also be delighted to be in any of our churches when it's my turn to turn up and break bread with fellow Christians. I'm delighted to be part of this family which stretches across the whole of our chaplaincy. And I'm delighted that using things like YouTube, that we are feeling much more connected one with another. But I'm saddened that we have found ourselves not looking for the best in everything and everyone. As some of you know, I do a radio show on a Sunday evening, Pure Gold, 94.1 FM. You can get it on the website, www.puregold.radio. I'm on from 6 till 8. It's great. I play rock music and other sorts of music. And I just have some fun. But before lockdown, I used to have guests come and share the show with me. And I had a guest once, it just happens to be my nephew. Well, I had no idea what he was going to say. But he'd been through a rough time. And someone had told him this. They'd said to him, make your first response to absolutely everything be a positive one. So everything you read, or everything you see, or everything you hear, or everything you witness, or every event, make sure that your first response is a positive one. Now, I know that there have been some email exchanges or some WhatsApp exchanges where people have seen something, read something into it that wasn't meant to be there, and fired off a response which was a bit hurtful. How about reading something, whatever it may be, and taking a step back, like Jesus says in this parable, and just reflecting whether or not we really believe that the person who sent it is sent it to be divisive, or whether or not we're reading stuff into it that wasn't meant there. And whatever it is, make our response a positive one. Now, Jesus teaches all of us, I believe, to love one another, to look out for one another. And he gives us gifts and talents in order that we can build the kingdom of God in the place where I believe he has called us to be. We have been attacked by an enemy, which is this coronavirus. And it's brought the best out in many of us. It's also brought a bit of the worst out in some of us. And it's not for us to judge. It is for us to do what we believe Jesus calls us to do. And that is to love one another, to worship him, and to build the kingdom of God in this place. Bless you, bless you, bless you. And until next time.